Hi, everyone. Today I have the pleasure to speak to Ekaterina Almasque, who is a general partner with OpenOcean VC. Hi, Katya. Welcome to European Women in VC.
Hi, King. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's great to see you. You're in London. How are things going over there?
All good. Life is busy despite the situation, which hopefully will improve soon, thanks to this all good news on vaccinations.
Yeah, keeping my fingers crossed for that and hoping to meet up in person in London shortly when we can all travel. Katya, so we wanted to talk a bit about you. You're the general partner with OpenOcean, but your interest in venture, in technology started, well, quite a while ago now. You were originally a software architect on emerging distributed architectures. Tell us about the beginnings of your career and then how that progressed into a focus into VC.
Well, yeah, indeed, it was like a 10 years journey before I joined with the VC industry in 2006. I don't know even where to start. We can probably talk about my software ventures separately. I was scouted basically for the first job. I was scouted by a company called Amadeus, which is headquartered in Madrid. But software development happens in France, and this company is a global distributed systems for airlines and travel. And they, imagine back in 90s, they had a big mainframe that handled your ticketing, and whenever you want to travel, you just went there and they handle. And they had this dream to go online and build this internet product. And they scouted me and they said, "Can you come and help us?" And I was 20 years old, and why not? I love Côte d'Azur, I love France, why not? And it sounds like an interesting task. So what I didn't realize is how to bring a monolithic mainframe architecture into internet structure, and especially when you don't have skill sets in the team and so on. So it was a journey of many different partnerships in the US and Canada, and finally we brought to the market what I was calling a great grandmother of booking.com. So it was it was an impressive achievement for this time, end of 90s, but still the world went on since then. But I was like in this situation, I was at Amadeus and I thought, well, it's great to use technologies, but actually technology baking is happening somewhere else. And I'm actually interested more in technology baking rather than use of technologies. And at this point, there was a great opportunity at Siemens Corporate Technology in Munich, in Germany, to join them as a software architect. And this was really the beginning of my kind of starting to be really infected by this bug of, I want more technologies. We were working on very interesting stuff. We were working on, for instance, peer-to-peer before Skype was born. Foundations of the cloud architecture before cloud came into market. I was dreaming about manufacturing happening like a Lego store when you put blocks together and machines talk to machines. And also at this point, Siemens had mobile phones division. It was sold later. And of course, one of the things we noticed that monolithic architecture of the mobile phone doesn't allow you to create new businesses out of it for third parties. So we started to work on APIs, and for some period, I led standardization, which was Java standardization committee at Sun Microsystems to create interfaces so that we could decouple architectures. So, it's a lot of technology terms, but actually what was happening, we were actually creating the technologies for the future. And then sitting there, and at some points, I was speaking at the same conferences that Eric Schmidt was speaking, co-founder of Google, at peer-to-peer conference, O'Reilly back in 2001. And I was thinking why some companies can take advantage of those technologies and some cannot. Because you could see clearly the opportunity was there, but some were rising and some were just talking about this. And this started to kind of come into my mind. Can I just be somewhere in a place where I can help some companies to make more out of those opportunities? And this is how this whole idea of switching to venture capital came.
Wow. Okay. So you've been in venture for the last 10 years?
Well, it's more
But
than
you're
that yet. It's 2016. Yeah, from 2006 is a long
okay,
time.
14 years. You actually started also as an entrepreneur very early. I think you were 17 when you set up your first software company. So this is an amazing experience from all sides, from the founder level, from the corporate level, and also from venture. So tell us a little bit more about the venture, how all that started, and the kind of companies and projects you've worked with, and and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I think I was a little bit lucky because I'm actually originally from Russia. I was born and I grew up in St. Petersburg. And when I was 15 years old, the country collapsed. And, the market was Wild West, what I said, because opportunities were everywhere. And actually, there were not enough products to solve the market needs, and not enough capital at the same time. But actually, you could do anything. So I graduated from one of the top mathematical schools, and my mind was always with this: what can you do with mathematical equations and so on. And the first startup was actually around price elasticity, and I put into software Monte Carlo simulation to help entrepreneurs to figure out what is the right price in the hyperinflation scenarios. And it was extremely popular because nobody knew even for how much you can sell milk, not to say like high. So this was my first startup. And the other startup was around it was an alternative to SIP, and it was around an idea that my parents actually started, but I have continued and helped them to build. But these were really great experiences. And later on, I was really much deep in the software development at Siemens Corporate Technology. For instance, I was writing parts of the operating system for mobile phone, and learned very good lessons. Like, for example, if you don't pay attention to cybersecurity, and we shipped phones to the market, and I did something wrong, and we had to call back 20,000 mobile phones back, and it was very painful and shameful for me. But you learn something like this. So I think now, when I talk to founders, I think all this comes back because I have been through the journey myself, and a lot of little things matter. And also, it doesn't help maybe sometimes to give a lot of advice. There are things that will go wrong. There are things that need to be figured out, but the journeys and maybe the dream and vision, and if there is a market need, I think this is what important that makes a startup succeed or not.
Well, that's a lot of experience that I think that you are helping the founders, where you are sitting on the board of those companies that really can appreciate your knowledge and all this time. I wanted to ask you about some of the companies you have invested in over the last 14, 15 years. One of them was GraphCore. Today it's a unicorn. You were a very, very early investor in there at a time when I guess not many people were thinking about AI infrastructure. Could you talk a little bit about that?
No, absolutely. And, it was, I have to say, this team is absolutely amazing and astonishing. Nigel and Simon, the founders of this opportunity came at the right time. I actually have background in artificial intelligence. I graduated from the university with a major in artificial intelligence. And seeing where the market is and looking at some of the opportunities, it was clear at some point that current architectures are not keeping up with the speed of the development and the compute power we need. And then when Nigel and Simon came in 2015, and it was through Hermann Hauser, actually, he introduced us, saying, look, there is a spin out. We are thinking about spin out from Exmos. What do you think? We need at least one external investor. And, I was fascinated by the idea. And there was no product at this point. Actually, there was mainly discussion. Like, they told me how they want to do it, and they explained the architecture. And the architecture was very similar to distributed architectures you use in data centers. And I said, well, it makes sense. Why others didn't do it? So, and there was a patent related to that. And I was really fascinated. The difficulty, the challenge is, especially in Europe and such ideas, is that it's very hard to believe that you can build another big company. For some reason, there's reluctance to believe. And there was a lot of this, but how can you build a semiconductor, like a leading semiconductor company out of Bristol? And I said, of course you can, because there are only 5 places in the world where you can do it. And Bristol is one of them. And by the way, the other one is Dresden, which, you might not think immediately off the top of your head. But if you want to build something like this, it's Bristol. And, it took a lot of time to actually to do this deal and convince everyone who was involved in the process. But once we have started the journey, I think it was a no-brainer for other investors actually that there is a huge opportunity. And I think Nigel, of course, and Simon, they are doing a great job in building this big company. I hope it will go really public at some point.
Yeah, and we definitely need more and more of this deep technology, enabling technology for the future companies coming out of Europe and just showing the example to others. I think this is something that it's great to see, and GraphCore is definitely one of those. I wanted to ask you a little bit. You've worked both on the CVC side, and now you're in a you're in a regular venture capital firm. Could you just talk a little bit about the similarities and differences in having both types of investors for the founders or for the startups? Or what are the difference in approach? What are the similarities there?
Yeah, I think so. It's a hard question to answer, to be honest. And indeed, I have spent majority of my career within corporate. So it was EMC, Siemens in Silicon Valley, and then also Samsung, managing director for Europe. I think corporates can bring a lot of value, especially when the company is ready to scale, and especially when there is like strategic partnership in place, and this strategic partnership can be accelerated and helped by the involvement of the venture capital arm. I think this is more valuable in the later stages of the company.
Okay.
Like when really much more capital is needed, but also these strategic partnerships are accelerating, and venture capital could help. In the early stages of venture, thinking with the founder how to scale the company and really helping hands-on the founder to scale the company, I think independent ventures are doing, to be honest, a much better job, and that's why probably preferable for in the early stages to have just independent VCs. Decision making is very different as well, and the level of support I think you get is very different in terms of hands-on and experience independent VCs are bringing to the table. So, but it's very, I think it's case by case situation, which each founder might be deciding. Does it make sense for me to have now this particular corporate venture with me? And sometimes it makes total sense and really accelerates growth.
Okay. Technology enabling data-driven economy like AI, like quantum, continue to be your main focus. What are the current trends that you're really excited about in that space?
Well, so at OpenOcean, we come with a background, founders of OpenOcean were founders of MySQL and also MariaDB. And these are two founding blocks of the LAMP stack that was the foundation of the Web 1.0, so the first generation of internet. And of course, this is important infrastructure. And I think at OpenOcean, we think that without infrastructure, the data economy wouldn't work. So we continue to look at what is important to build for the next generation. And we are looking at the technology enablers, like you're saying, artificial intelligence, quantum, and so on. So here, for instance, the trends we are seeing, so the world is becoming really complex. And, we have now a lot of solutions at the same time. The cost of data, storage and processing is growing. And this becomes a problem for businesses. We also see that maybe 80%, I'm just saying on top of the head, some number, but a long number of businesses are not digitalized and industries are not digitalized. Yes. Even talking about healthcare, mobility, you name it. There are some early pivots into the digitalization, but the large scale digitalization hasn't happened, and it won't happen until we resolve some of these bottlenecks. So we need to resolve, the cost of doing this. We need to resolve the privacy concerns of this. We need to resolve the speed of doing things. Like it cannot happen. It cannot happen when we are in the crisis like today, like COVID, and we know that we need data to come up with vaccine. But it takes about 2 weeks to download data from a biobank. because it's large data sets. These are all things that I think we need to look at, and we are not specifically focusing on any industry, but we are looking at how do we resolve these bottlenecks that would be helpful for all the industries.
Okay. I wanted to come back a little bit on OpenOcean, and I guess we didn't really talk about the fund itself. Could you just give the audience a rundown of the areas of focus, the ticket size, when is the right time to approach you, and with what?
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we are early stage investor across Europe. We love B2B software. And we invest usually in Series A, or we say it early Series A. So it's kind of like a little bit earlier than most of the Series A funding rounds, but we kind of approach the investment as a Series A. So it's we really try to see that there is a little bit of traction, but at the same time we look at the opportunity, like how can this company scale really fast. So our ticket is about on average 3 million into company. We invest on average about 15-16 companies per fund. Now we are into our third fund. We just launched.
Congratulations.
And then
recently closed, right?
Thank you. Yeah, so
Brilliant.
it has been a journey, and companies from previous funds, to be honest, they are doing really great. We make sometimes exceptions, like we have in our previous fund an investment in the quantum machines, IQM company out of Finland. It's a little bit story similar to Graphco. It's a processor for the for quantum machines. But we thought that it's a very critical part of the data infrastructure stack. So for some of the tasks of the future, we really need to do that. And even though maybe it's a slightly different scalability path than majority of B2B businesses, it's something we want to look at. But in the technology enablers areas, we look at anything like automation of businesses, for instance. What can bring the next wave of automation, how we can speed up this data infrastructure, the whole cloud stack, or an alternative cloud stack, things like that. Artificial intelligence, what are the next breakthroughs, either in computer vision or voice, or you name it. We look for decision making. Actually, our ideal investment would be something resolving decision making and helping businesses to decide on things. And also, of course, our kind of DNA is open source. It doesn't have to be open source, but when there is an open source component, we think we can also help figure out a lot how to build a successful commercial business around open source. So of course, we know a lot of founders in this space, majority of the founders, and with our background, we like to connect whether we invest or not.
This sounds like you could have quite a huge pipeline from Central Europe. So I hope that you get involved in the region more and more.
We have fantastic investments from Central and Eastern Europe. So we have actually companies in Hungary and Poland that are developing extremely well, and we are very happy. We think that the talent is just outstanding there.
That's brilliant.
Amazing.
That's great. So so maybe we switch a little bit onto the focus of the founders themselves. So if you're a founder of a business enabling the future of the data economy today in this current environment, what should you do? What are the kind of pieces of advice that you could tell to these founders? We're in this pandemic stage, and then with the state of the market that we are in as well, I think anything that can help founders would be really helpful.
Well, it's we have been thinking a lot, especially at the beginning of pandemic, what scenarios could be, and how we think about the risk profile. And I think what we saw that some of the companies, what we call resilient companies, start to outperform their peers even in the times of crisis. So what we are trying to help our founders to think through is how do you become more resilient, and how do you make sure that you're still focused on revenues, and you outperforming, take opportunities during the pandemic, even crisis times, to then come even stronger out of the crisis. I think we were quite lucky because most of our portfolio, I think if not all, weathered the crisis really well. And some of them just, their rounds were oversubscribed, to be honest, because they are doing so well, and there was a lot of interest globally from the US and everywhere to actually invest in them. But I think the key here was really focusing on their, weathering the crisis in a reasonable way and down to earth. And I think Tom, one of my partners, he also published some kind of step-by-step thinking through what can be done. I think there is a lot of valuable advice there. But really focusing on having enough capital to get through. And I think this was one of the main things we talked through. If needed, there was a need to reduce the amount of spending during the crisis in order to spend on just very, very important things and strategic things. But again, luckily things look well. And I think for majority of VCs actually investing in the digital or the driven solutions, I think the crisis is just, the current situation is helping to promote digital businesses. And we are kind of in a lucky situation these days.
It's definitely promoting B2B digital projects right across.
That's correct. Yeah. And we, of course, we need to find solution, because I think that the suffering of the society today might have been less if we would be more digitally prepared.
Yeah.
For this crisis.
Yeah. Katya, we're on European Women in VC, and I wanted to ask a female question to do with, women in venture, women in startups. What are your thoughts on this space? How can we get more female GPs, female founders? How can we make this space a little bit more diverse? What can we do?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I think, there I think there is a lot of willingness right now in the industry to get more women involved, and I think this is a great change. I think that this wasn't there 10 years ago, as you know, so or even 5 years ago, it was a different place. So the change has started now. I think one of the things for women who are already in the industry is to show that we bring value beyond just diversity, right? Because it's not just having, someone from with a diverse environment just for the sake of it, but actually there is really value coming from this. And I think all women whom we know in the network, they are bringing a lot of good investments and value to the funds where they are. But I think that the challenge is, especially in the technology investments, is broader than this. And it's why so few women are still going into these subjects, or why they're perceived to be so difficult to get there. And then once you are in this environment, sometimes there is still perceptions and this and that, which can be dealt with in a way. So I think we need to speak about this more, and I think we need to bring case studies where things went successfully. I think women have very unique way of dealing with complexity, and this comes to generations and generations of dealing with life complex situation. But today the world is becoming more and more complex, and this way of women connecting the dots in a very special way sometimes helps to see through complexity, to see multidimensional things, and in that really shows the way where it could go. And I think this is very unique, actually very, very unique ability of women. And in this particular situation and in the future world, it will be more and more helpful to any business. So I think if we kind of communicate this better and we build really stories around this, how to deal with complexity and how women bring this aspect, I think we can really bring more women on board and more acceptance of women being on board.
I hope so too. That's one of the reasons why we're doing these podcasts, because we really, really want to increase the number of women working in venture capital, being partners of funds, and also investing in female founders. It would be great to have more and more companies that are more mixed, more diverse. So that's the mission and the goal. Thank you so much, Katya. It's been a pleasure having you again. Ekaterina Almasque from OpenOcean Venture Capital. It was a pleasure to see you and to speak to you, and all the best of luck with all the things you do.
Thank you, Kinga. This is fantastic. Really appreciate it. And you're wonderful. And thank you for running this and this initiative. We need it.
Thanks so much. Take care.